My name is Franklin, and for a man who spent 41 years mastering the art of moving things, the hardest journey I ever took was the 50-foot walk from my office to the conference room they called the Summit. It was a stupid name, dreamt up by some marketing consultant in the early 2000s, but on that particular Tuesday it felt grimly appropriate. I was at the summit of my career, looking down at the sheer cliff they were about to push me off. If you're watching this, you probably know what that feels like. That sense that the ground beneath your feet, ground you yourself laid, is about to give way. It's a feeling that gets deep into your bones. If you do know it, stick around. You're going to like how this story ends. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell because you'll want to hear more stories like this one. The summons had come in the form of a calendar invite from a name I didn't recognize, Jessica from HR. The title was simply Organizational Update. In a company like O'Malley Freight, organizational update is a corporate euphemism that means someone's life is about to be professionally detonated. I'd been there long enough to know the blast radius. As I walked, I passed the wall of photographs in the main hall. There was a grainy black and white of me and old man O'Malley himself, taken in 1982. I was a kid of 24, leaning against the grill of our first Kenworth, holding a clipboard that probably had more ambition on it than actual delivery orders. He had his arm around my shoulder, a cigar clenched in his teeth, his eyes crinkled with a smile that said he knew we were onto something. We had 2 trucks back then, and a map, a big paper map of the eastern seaboard, full of pins and greasy fingerprints. I built this place, not with money or a fancy degree, but with sweat, shoe leather, and an obsessive understanding of how to get a box from point A to point B faster and more reliably than anyone else. I didn't just create a logistics network. I created a family. The drivers, the dispatchers, the mechanics in the yard. They weren't just employee numbers to me. I knew their kids' names. I'd been to their weddings and, sadly, a few of their funerals. My loyalty was never to the green and gold logo on the side of the trailer. It was to the people who kept those wheels turning. I opened the door to the summit, and there he was, Kyle, the new VP of Operations, barely 6 months into the job. He was everything I wasn't: young, maybe 32, with a haircut that cost more than my first car and a suit so sharp you could get a paper cut just looking at it. He had an MBA from some Ivy League school that he liked to mention in every meeting, as if the diploma itself could magically unload a 20-ton shipment of produce in the middle of a blizzard. Next to him sat Jessica from HR, a woman with the forced, sterile smile of a dentist about to deliver bad news. Kyle gestured to the empty chair across the polished mahogany table. He didn't stand up. He just sort of waved a hand. Sit, like I was a dog. I sat. The air in the room was cold, sterile. It smelled like weak coffee and fear. Kyle started with the usual jargon. He talked about synergy, about streamlining, about pivoting towards a more agile, data-driven operational paradigm. It was a word salad of meaningless buzzwords, designed to sound important while saying nothing at all. He used the word legacies a lot. Legacy systems, legacy thinking, legacy personnel. He said it like it was a disease. After 41 years, I wasn't a veteran. I was a legacy. He finally got to the point, his voice smooth and devoid of any human warmth. He said, as part of their forward-looking strategy, they were restructuring the logistics division. He said my role was being eliminated. Eliminated, not me. My role. As if the last 4 decades of my life were just a line item on a spreadsheet that he could drag into the trash bin. I just looked at him. I didn't say a word. I wanted to see if he could even meet my eye. He couldn't. His gaze kept flicking to his expensive watch, to the skyline outside, anywhere but at the man whose career he was ending. With the casual indifference of someone swatting a fly, Jessica slid a thick folder across the table. The severance package. She started talking about Cobra and outplacement services, her voice a monotonous drone. I didn't open the folder. I knew what was in there. A few months' pay, a gag order disguised as a non-disclosure agreement, and the legal paperwork to sever my connection to the company I had built from nothing. He thought my experience was a cost. He was about to learn it was his only real asset. The real knife twist came when Kyle mentioned my pension. He leaned forward, a look of faux sympathy on his face. He said it was unfortunate, the timing of it all, that the board had decided to freeze the old pension plan for Legacy's employees as part of a cost-saving measure, transitioning everyone to a 401k match system. My 41 years of service, my handshake agreement with Old Man O'Malley, that my pension was my reward for a lifetime of loyalty. It was all gone, dissolved by a committee of strangers who saw it as nothing more than a liability on a balance sheet. Kyle made it sound like an unfortunate coincidence, but I saw the glint in his eye. This wasn't a coincidence. This was the whole point of the exercise. My salary and pension were a big number, and getting rid of it would make his first-year numbers look fantastic. He was cashing in my life's work for a gold star on his performance review. I finally spoke. My voice was quiet, steady. I asked, "Is that all?" Kyle seemed almost relieved that I wasn't making a scene. He nodded, that slick smile returning to his face. He said, "Franklin, we appreciate your decades of service. We're having a small farewell party for you in the break room on Friday. Cake and everything." A cake. They were trading 41 years of my life for a $10 sheet cake from the grocery store. The sheer, breathtaking arrogance of it was almost impressive. I stood up. I looked at Kyle. Really looked at him this time. I saw the hollowness behind the expensive suit. He was a child playing with a machine he didn't understand. He saw trucks and warehouses and shipping lanes. He didn't see the intricate web of trust and personal favors that made it all work. He didn't see Big Mike, who could get a rig through the Donner Pass in a whiteout because he'd been driving it for 30 years. He didn't see Maria, my head dispatcher, who could reroute a dozen trucks around a 5-state pileup on the fly, using a system of phone calls and gut instinct that no algorithm could replicate. He didn't understand that O'Malley Freight wasn't a company. It was a network of people, and I was the switchboard. I said, "Don't bother with the cake, Kyle. I think I'm a little too Legacy's for frosting." I turned and walked out of the room, leaving the folder on the table, unopened. I could feel his eyes on my back, a mix of confusion and irritation. He thought he'd won. He thought he'd cut the dead weight, cleared a path for his brilliant new vision. He thought my loyalty was to the logo on the truck. He was wrong. My loyalty is to the drivers I hired, the dispatchers I trained, and the clients who have my personal cell number, the people who made it run. The drive home was a blur. It's a 40-minute commute I'd done over 10,000 times, a path so ingrained in my muscle memory I could probably do it in my sleep. But that day, I saw none of it. My world had shrunk to the space inside my Ford F-150, the hum of the engine a dull roar in my ears. The silence was deafening. For the first time in 4 decades, my phone wasn't ringing. There was no dispatcher calling about a breakdown in Omaha, no driver asking about a way station in Texas, no client needing a last-minute change to a shipment. The constant familiar thrum of my professional life had been severed with the clean, brutal efficiency of a guillotine. I pulled into my driveway and just sat there for a long time, the engine ticking as it cooled. I looked at my house, the one I'd bought with the money from O'Malley, the one where my wife Sarah and I raised our son. Every brick felt like a monument to a life that had just been declared obsolete. I felt a cold, hollow ache spread through my chest. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was something deeper, something more wounding. It was the feeling of being erased. 41 years. I started when I was younger than Kyle is now. I remembered my first week, riding shotgun with Old Man O'Malley, in a beat-up rig that smelled of stale cigars and diesel. He wasn't a business school graduate. He was a former driver who'd saved up enough to buy his own truck. He pointed out the window at the passing landscape and said, "Frank, this business isn't about boxes, it's about promises. A guy in one city promises a guy in another city something will be there on Tuesday. Our job is to make sure that promise is kept, no matter what." That was the foundation of the company. a promise. We didn't have GPS or sophisticated logistics software back then. We had paper maps, a CB radio, and a network of payphones. I spent years on the road myself before moving into the office. I learned every back road, every shortcut, every 24-hour diner, with a mechanic who could fix a busted alternator at 3 in the morning. I built the system not on theory, but on asphalt and grit. I knew which drivers could handle the mountain passes in winter, and which ones were best for the long, flat runs across the plains. I knew which clients needed their shipments delivered before dawn, and which ones had loading docks that were a nightmare to back into. This wasn't data on a screen. It was knowledge etched into my brain, earned through a lifetime of experience. Kyle, with his MBA and his data-driven paradigms, saw none of that. He saw an old man with an old system. In one of our first meetings, he'd brought up his pet project, a new fully automated routing software called OptiRoute. He presented a slideshow full of charts and graphs, showing how it would increase efficiency by 12.7% by eliminating human variables. I tried to explain to him that the human variables were what made us successful. They were Maria, knowing a local festival in Scranton was going to shut down a key street and routing our trucks around it a day in advance. They were Big Mike, calling in a tip about an unexpected snowstorm brewing over the Rockies that wasn't on the official forecast yet. The software couldn't account for that. It could only read data. It couldn't read the world. He'd smiled that condescending little smile of his and said, "Franklin, I appreciate your institutional knowledge, but we need to trust the algorithm. It's about scale. We can't scale a business based on one man's gut feelings." He didn't get it. It wasn't just my gut. I had spent 40 years building a network of other people's guts, hundreds of them, all across the country. That was the system he was so eager to dismantle. Competence isn't cheap until you lose it. I finally killed the engine and went inside. Sarah met me at the door. She took one look at my face and knew. She didn't say a word, just wrapped her arms around me. She'd been telling me for years that the company was changing, that the loyalty old man O'Malley had prized was a relic of a bygone era. After the merger that brought in Kyle's corporate parent company, she saw the writing on the wall. I, in my stubborn loyalty, had refused to see it. I thought my value was self-evident, a classic foolish mistake. Later that evening, our son David called. He was in his final year of an MBA program himself, ironically at a school not too different from Kyle's. But David was different. He had my pragmatism and Sarah's empathy. He'd spent his summers working in the O'Malley warehouses, loading trucks and learning the business from the ground up. When I told him what happened, he wasn't just angry, he was analytical. He said, "Dad, what Kyle did is straight out of the first-year M&A playbook. They call it synergistic value extraction. They acquire a company with a strong foundation, fire the experienced, high-cost employees who built that foundation, and replace them with cheaper systems and personnel. It boosts the short-term profit margin, the stock price gets a bump, and the execs who orchestrated it get massive bonuses. By the time the whole thing rots from the inside out, they've already moved on to their next target." Hearing my life's work reduced to a cold, predatory business school term lit a fire in me. The hollow ache in my chest began to burn, solidifying from grief into a cold, hard resolve. David continued, his voice tight. "The thing they never account for, Dad, is the unquantifiable assets, the things that don't show up on a balance sheet. Trust, relationships, reputation. Kyle doesn't see those as assets. He sees them as sentimental fluff. He's about to get a very expensive education in the difference between price and value." We talked for an hour. I told him about Kyle's OptiRoute software. He was quiet for a moment, and then he said something that crystallized everything for me. "Dad, these systems are designed to be perfect in a perfect world. But the world isn't perfect. Trucking isn't perfect. It's a business of constant, relentless imperfection. A flat tire, a closed road, a sick driver, a sudden storm. The software can't handle that. It's too rigid. Your system, the one you built, was designed for imperfection. It was flexible, it was human, and it was resilient because it was built on people who knew how to solve problems. He was right. Kyle hadn't just eliminated my role, he'd eliminated the company's immune system, and a storm was coming. The next few days were a strange limbo. I was officially on garden leave until my final day on Friday. My email was shut off, my access to the company servers revoked. The silence was unnerving. On Friday they had the farewell party. I didn't go, of course, but my phone buzzed late in the afternoon. It was a picture message from Maria, my head dispatcher. It was a photo of the break room. There was a sad-looking sheet cake with "Happy Trails, Franklin," written in sloppy blue icing. A handful of people, mostly office staff I barely knew, were standing around awkwardly, holding paper plates. None of my people were there. Not the drivers who were in the yard, not the other dispatchers. Maria's accompanying text said it all. They went to the bar across the street instead. They're raising a glass to you. Kyle cut the cake himself. Looked annoyed. That small act of defiance, of loyalty, meant more to me than any gold watch or farewell speech. It was proof that what I had built was real. It wasn't just in my head. The next day, Saturday, my personal cell phone rang. It was a number I knew well. It was Arthur Henderson, the CEO of Henderson Manufacturing, our biggest client for the last 20 years. They were a $5 million a year account. I'd personally negotiated their first contract with Old Man O'Malley. Art didn't beat around the bush. "Franklin," he said, his voice gruff, "I called your office line, and some young kid with a silver tongue told me you'd transitioned out of the company. What the hell is going on?" I told him the truth, simply and without emotion. I was retired, effective immediately. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then Art said, "Retired? Hell you are. They pushed you out, didn't they? That new VP, the one who looks like he should be selling hair gel, not running a freight company. I met him once, didn't like him. He used the word synergies 5 times in 2 minutes." I chuckled. "That sounds about right." Art continued, his voice hardening. "Listen, Franklin, my contract is with O'Malley Freight, but my trust is with you. For 20 years, when I had a problem, I called you. When I needed a shipment moved on Christmas Eve, you made it happen. You're the reason I've stuck with that company, through thick and thin. So you tell me, what are you doing next?" And that was the catalyst. That was the moment the grief and resignation burned away completely, leaving behind the cold, clear certainty of a man who knows his worth. Before I could even answer him, my call waiting beeped. It was another number I didn't recognize, but the area code was from the city where our biggest competitor, Apex Hauling, was headquartered. I told Art I'd call him back. I switched over. The voice on the other end was smooth, professional. "Mr. Franklin, my name is Robert Chen. I'm the CEO of Apex Hauling. I heard through the grapevine you might be on the market. I've been competing against your network for 15 years, and frankly, I've been losing. I don't want to compete against you anymore. I want you to come work for me. Name your price. I want you to build for me what you built for them." I hung up the phone. I stood in my quiet home office, the place where I had taken thousands of calls for O'Malley, and I looked out the window. The world felt different. It wasn't ending. It was beginning. Kyle thought he'd gotten rid of a liability. He had no idea he had just armed his biggest competitor with a weapon of mass destruction. I start Monday, and my first order of business wouldn't be to steal trade secrets. It would be to make a few phone calls and watch Kyle's network crumble as the people who made it run followed the man they trust, not the company that discarded him. The weekend was a blur of activity, but it was a new kind of activity. It wasn't the frantic, reactive chaos of putting out fires at O'Malley. It was the quiet, methodical work of a general planning a campaign. Sarah saw the change in me immediately. The defeated slump in my shoulders was gone. replaced by a straight-back purpose she hadn't seen in years. She just kept my coffee cup full and left me to it. My first call wasn't to Apex Hauling to accept their offer. It was to a man named Ben Carter, a lawyer who specialized in employment contracts. I'd met him through a friend at the golf club years ago. On Saturday morning, I sat in his quiet, book-lined office and slid the severance folder across his desk. It was the first time I'd opened it. Ben, a sharp-eyed man in his 60s with a calm demeanor, read through the documents in silence. He'd occasionally let out a low hum or make a note on a legal pad. After about 20 minutes, he took off his reading glasses and looked at me. "Franklin, this is a fairly standard but aggressive separation agreement," he said. "The non-disclosure is ironclad. You can't talk about internal O'Malley business, financials, or strategies. The non-solicitation clause is also quite broad. It prohibits you from actively recruiting any O'Malley employee for a period of 12 months. I felt a knot in my stomach. "So they can stop me?" Ben smiled faintly. "That's what they want you to think. But look at the wording. Actively recruiting. That means you can't call up an O'Malley driver and say, 'I'll give you $10,000 to jump ship.' However, it doesn't say you can't answer your phone if they call you. It doesn't say you can't tell people where you've landed. And it certainly doesn't prevent a former colleague from applying for a publicly listed job at your new company. Loyalty isn't a commodity that can be restricted by a contract, Franklin. People have the right to choose where they work." Then he pointed to another clause, the non-compete. It's laughably broad. It says you can't work in any logistics or freight-related business in North Americas for 2 years. A good lawyer would tear this to shreds in court. It's unenforceable. It's a scare tactic, pure and simple. They're counting on you to be too intimidated to challenge it. A wave of relief washed over me. The cage Kyle thought he'd put me in had no bars. I spent the rest of Saturday in my home office with a fresh legal pad and a pen. I wasn't mapping out highways or delivery routes. I was mapping out relationships. The human network. At the top of the page, I wrote 3 names. They were my keystones. The 3 people whose departure would cause a catastrophic failure in Kyle's shiny new system. The first was Big Mike, Michael Petrovich. He wasn't just a driver. He was the unofficial union steward, the paterfamilias of the long-haul fleet. He'd been with me for 30 years. He was the guy younger drivers went to for advice. He was the one who knew which routes were safe during mudslide season and which truck stops had the cleanest showers. His opinion carried more weight in the driver's lounge than any corporate memo ever could. If Big Mike left, he wouldn't go alone. He'd create a vacuum that would pull the other good drivers with him. The second name was Maria Garcia, my head dispatcher. A genius. I'd hired her 25 years ago when she was a single mom working as a waitress. She had a mind like a steel trap and the calm demeanor of an air traffic controller. She didn't just manage logistics, she managed people's lives. She knew when a driver's kid had a baseball game and would try to route him home for it. She was the heart of the operation, the human element that Kyle's OptiRoute software was designed to eliminate. She was the one who could translate the cold data on the screen into real-world action. Without her, the dispatch center would be a headless chicken relying on a flawed algorithm that didn't know the difference between a state highway and a logging road. The third name was Arthur Henderson, the client. His business was the bedrock of O'Malley's revenue, but my relationship with him was more than just a contract. I'd helped his business grow by providing flawless, just-in-time delivery that his manufacturing process depended on. A single late shipment from us could shut down his entire assembly line, costing him hundreds of thousands of dollars a day. His loyalty wasn't to the O'Malley logo, it was to the promise of his parts arriving on time every time. A promise that for 20 years had my name attached to it. On Sunday morning, I called Robert Chen at Apex Hauling back. I accepted his offer, but with conditions. I told him I wanted to run a new specialized division. I wanted complete autonomy to hire my own team. I wanted a budget to offer competitive salaries and signing bonuses. and I told him my salary requirement, which was 30% higher than what O'Malley had been paying me. There was no hesitation on his end. "Done," he said. "When can you start?" "Tomorrow," I said. That afternoon, my son David came over. I walked him through my plan. I showed him the legal pad with the names, the network map. He listened intently, his expression a mixture of admiration and a student's critical eye. "This is brilliant, Dad," he said. "You're not attacking the company. You're just unplugging it. You're removing the key components of the machine, the ones Kyle doesn't even know exist. But what's the long-term play? You can't just rebuild the old O'Malley system at Apex. Kyle's failure is an opportunity to build something better." He was right. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about vindication. It was about proving that a human-centric approach to business wasn't legacy thinking, it was the future. We spent the next few hours brainstorming. David, with his fresh MBA perspective, talked about creating a new culture. He talked about profit sharing for the drivers, about investing in better training, about creating a career path for people in the warehouse. He talked about using technology not to replace people, but to empower them. We could use data analytics to identify problem routes, and then use the experience of drivers like Big Mike to figure out why they were problems and how to fix them. We could build a system that combined the best of my experience with the best of modern tools. He brought up a concept from one of his classes, flywheel effect. He said, "Dad, you're not just hiring people, you're starting a flywheel. You bring in the best drivers. That improves service reliability. That attracts more high-value clients like Henderson. The increased revenue allows you to offer better pay and benefits, which in turn attracts even more top-tier talent. It's a self-reinforcing cycle of excellence." Kyle's model is the opposite. It's a death spiral. He cuts costs, service quality drops, clients leave, revenue falls, and he has to cut costs even more. The phrase stuck with me, a self-reinforcing cycle of excellence. That's what I had built at O'Malley, without ever having a name for it. And that's what I would build again, deliberately this time. My plan wasn't just to watch O'Malley crumble, it was to build a monument to competence right next to the crater. I wasn't just taking my people back, I was offering them a better home. The final piece of my plan was subtle. I knew Kyle would be watching me, or at least, he'd have his HR and legal departments watching me. Any hint of poaching and he'd be all over me with lawsuits, even if they were frivolous. The goal was to make a splash without getting wet. So on Sunday evening, I made one more call to a friend of mine who was a journalist for a major logistics industry trade journal. I told him, off the record, that I had a big story for him. I told him I was starting a new role at Apex Hauling on Monday, heading up a new specialized division. I told him to keep an eye out for a press release later in the week. I knew that the news of my move would spread through the tight-knit logistics community like wildfire. Every driver, every dispatcher, every client who mattered would hear about it by Tuesday morning. I didn't need to call them. The grapevine would do the work for me. The plan was in place. The pieces were on the board. All I had to do was make the first move. Monday morning felt like the first day of school. I put on my best suit, not as flashy as Kyle's, but a solid, well-made one that Sarah had bought me for our anniversary. I drove to the Apex Hauling headquarters, a modern glass and steel building that hummed with a quiet energy. Robert Chen met me in the lobby. He was a man of my own generation, with a firm handshake and eyes that conveyed intelligence and respect. He didn't treat me like a relic. He treated me like a prize acquisition. He showed me to my new office. It was a corner office with a panoramic view of the city. It was bigger than my old one at O'Malley. On the desk was a new laptop, a new phone, and a simple, elegant nameplate that read Franklin Miller, President, Apex Specialized Logistics. Robert handed me a folder. In it are the employee application forms, benefits packages, and a list of open positions we've just posted online. Drivers, dispatchers, logistics coordinator. The hiring budget you asked for is approved. The division is yours, Franklin. Build it. He left me alone. I sat in the large leather chair and looked out at the city. For a moment, the scale of the task felt daunting. But then I looked at the phone on my desk. It was a tool, just like the paper maps and CB radios of the old days. The real power wasn't in the technology. It was in the names and numbers stored in my head. I didn't start by calling a client. I didn't start by calling a dispatcher. I started with the heart of the operation. I picked up the phone and dialed the personal cell number of Big Mike Petrovich. He picked up on the second ring. His voice was a low rumble. "Frank, what's up? We heard you got the boot. The boys at the yard are pissed." I smiled. The grapevine was already working. I said, "Mike, I didn't get the boot. I got a promotion. I've landed on my feet over at Apex Hauling. I'm running my own show now." There was a pause. Then Mike said, "Apex, they're a good outfit, solid equipment, pay a little better, from what I hear." I said, "They're about to pay a lot better. I've got the authority to build a new team from the ground up. I'm looking for the best, and I'm starting with you. I'm not offering you a job, Mike. I'm telling you there's a job here for you if you want it. It's posted online. Senior driver, route consultant, with a $10,000 signing bonus and a piece of the profit sharing." I could almost hear the gears turning in his head. He wasn't a man who made rash decisions. He asked about the routes, the benefits, the pension. I answered every question honestly. I told him about the flywheel concept, about building a company centered on respecting the driver. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I'll take a look at that application. I gotta talk to some of the other guys too, see how they're feeling. That new kid, Kyle, he's got everyone on edge. Brought in some new routing software that's a complete joke. Sent Jimmy O'Connell an hour out of his way yesterday because it didn't know a bridge was out for construction. A bridge that's been out for 6 months, Frank." I told him, "I know, Mike. That's why I'm here. Let me know what you decide." I hung up. I knew I had him. The hook was set. I hadn't poached him. I'd simply informed an old friend of a publicly available opportunity. Next, I sent a simple text message to Maria Garcia. It just said, "Landed at Apex. Hope you're doing okay." Her reply came back almost instantly. "Thank God. It's a madhouse here. Call me on my break." While I waited, I made my third call to Arthur Henderson. "Art, it's Franklin. I just wanted to let you know where I've ended up. I'm over at Apex Hauling now." His response was immediate. "Apex? Good for you, Frank. How soon can you get their trucks over to my plant?" I told him it would take a little time to get the new division up and running. I needed to build the team, establish the routes. I was honest about the timeline. I told him I could probably start handling his shipments within a month. He said, "A month? Franklin, my contract with O'Malley is up for renewal in 60 days. It has a performance clause in it. If they have a single late shipment between now and then, I have the right to terminate for cause. That new VP of yours, Kyle, he sent me a welcome basket last week full of cheap wine and a pen with his face on it. I don't think he's even read my contract. Keep me posted on your progress." The dominoes were starting to wobble. Kyle, in his arrogance, was focused on cutting costs. He had no idea that his biggest revenue stream was hanging by the thread of a performance clause he wasn't even aware of. At precisely 12:15 p.m., my phone rang. It was Maria. She sounded stressed. "Franklin, you have no idea. It's chaos. The Opti route system is a disaster. It doesn't account for traffic, construction, or even driver hours of service regulations. It's trying to assign drivers routes that are physically and legally impossible to complete on time. We've had 3 missed delivery windows this morning alone. 3. We used to go months without a single one." She continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Kyle held a morning meeting with the dispatch team. He said we needed to embrace the digital transformation and stop relying on anecdotal evidence. He actually said that. He told me my experience was a cognitive bias that was hindering efficiency. I tried to explain the bridge closure, and he told me to file a bug report with the software vendor. I listened patiently. I let her vent. I knew that Kyle's incompetence was my most effective recruiting tool. A man like that creates his own opposition. He didn't need me to sabotage him. He was doing a perfectly fine job of it himself. I told her, Maria, I'm at Apex. I'm building a new team. There's a head dispatcher role with your name on it. Better pay, better benefits, and a management that actually listens. The job is posted on their website. No pressure. Just think about it. She didn't even hesitate. I'll fill out the application on my lunch break. Can I bring my team with me? The other two senior dispatchers, Carla and Ray, they're ready to walk too. I told her, have them apply. I can't promise anything, but I'm looking for the best. And you three are the best. By the end of my first day at Apex, I had done nothing more than make 3 phone calls and send 1 text message. I hadn't stolen a single piece of paper, hacked a single server, or violated a single clause in my separation agreement. I had simply activated a network of people built on a foundation of trust and mutual respect. And across town, in the quiet, sterile offices of O'Malley Freight, the first tremors of the earthquake were just beginning to be felt. Kyle had no idea that the ground beneath his feet was already gone. He was standing on a sinkhole, and it was about to swallow him whole. The first sign of panic from O'Malley came on Wednesday. It didn't come in the form of a phone call from Kyle or a letter from his lawyers. It came through Maria, who was now my official, albeit still covert, source of inside information. She had submitted her application, as had Carla and Ray. They were just waiting for me to officially extend the offers. She called me during her commute home, her voice a mix of exhilaration and disbelief. You're not going to believe this, Franklin. Big Mike and 4 other senior drivers walked into HR this afternoon and gave their 2 weeks' notice. Together, they said they were taking positions at a competitor that valued experience. They didn't even mention Apex by name. I could picture the scene perfectly. Big Mike, a man whose presence filled any room he was in, standing there with his arms crossed, calm and resolute, as the HR manager stammered. The other 4 drivers, all 20-plus-year veterans, standing behind him like a wall. It wasn't a resignation. It was a statement. Maria continued, breathlessly. Kyle completely lost it. He came storming out of his office and cornered them in the hallway. He started talking about loyalty, about how O'Malley had been good to them. Mike just looked him dead in the eye and said, "No, son. Franklin was good to us. O'Malley was just the name on the check. And you're not Franklin." Then they just walked away. Kyle was left standing there, his face as red as a stop sign. The first keystone had been pulled. The departure of those 5 drivers wasn't just a loss of 5 trucks on the road. It was a loss of over a century's worth of combined experience. These were the guys who could mentor the younger drivers, the ones who knew how to handle the most difficult loads and the trickiest customers. They were the backbone. The panic at O'Malley headquarters escalated quickly. On Thursday, Kyle called an emergency all-hands meeting for the entire logistics and operations staff. Maria gave me a play-by-play via text message from inside the conference room. It was a disaster. According to Maria, Kyle stood at the podium and delivered a tone-deaf speech about a new era of opportunity. He blamed the recent disruptions on a small group of employees resistant to change. He talked about how their departure would allow the company to accelerate its transition to a more efficient, data-centric model. He was essentially telling the remaining employees that their most respected colleagues were dinosaurs and that they were lucky to be rid of them. Then came the bribe. He announced an immediate 5% loyalty bonus for all remaining drivers and dispatchers, a desperate, transparent ploy. As Maria texted me, 5% of a job you hate is still a job you hate. The truly calamitous move, however, was his announcement about the OptiRoute software. Instead of acknowledging its flaws, he doubled down. He announced that, effective Monday, all manual overrides by the dispatch team would be disabled. The system's routes would be final. The dispatcher's role was now simply to communicate the computer's decisions to the drivers, not to question them. He had taken his most experienced problem solvers and turned them into glorified receptionists. He was so blinded by his faith in technology and his own supposed genius that he couldn't see he was sawing off the limb he was sitting on. That announcement was the final push. Maria, Carla, and Ray needed. I received their signed offer letters via email that evening. Their last day at O'Malley would be in 2 weeks. The heart of the dispatch center was about to be ripped out. My own work at Apex was moving at lightning speed. Robert Chen was true to his word, giving me every resource I needed. We secured a new dedicated yard and a small office building for the specialized logistics division. I spent my days interviewing, not just the O'Malley veterans who were now flooding the Apex Careers portal with applications, but also experienced drivers and dispatchers from other companies who had heard through the grapevine that Franklin Miller was building something new. My son David was my unofficial consultant. Every night we'd get on a video call. I'd tell him about the candidates I'd interviewed, and he's helped me think through the cultural fit. He was building a financial model for the profit-sharing plan, ensuring it was both generous enough to attract top talent and sustainable for the business. He told me, "Dad, you're not just stealing Kyle's best employees, you're creating a talent magnet. Word is getting out. Apex is becoming the place where the best people want to work. Kyle's not just losing a fight with you, he's losing the war for talent across the entire region." He thought he was cutting costs, but he's created a competency vacuum that is going to pull his whole operation apart. The competency vacuum. I liked that. It was the perfect description for the hole Kyle had created. By the end of the second week, the first wave of the exodus was complete. I had hired away a dozen of O'Malley's best drivers, including Big Mike. I had hired their entire senior dispatch team. These weren't just employees. They were the institutional knowledge of the company walking out the door. And then Arthur Henderson made his move. He called me on a Friday afternoon. "Franklin," he said, his voice grim, "it happened, just as we predicted. A critical shipment of components was supposed to arrive at my plant this morning at 6 a.m. It's now 4 p.m., and the truck is still sitting in a traffic jam 100 miles away. Your old company's new wonder system routed him through the middle of a city during a parade that has been publicly scheduled for 3 months. My assembly line has been down all day. This is going to cost me." He took a deep breath. "I'm invoking the performance clause. I'm terminating my contract with O'Malley Freight, effective immediately. Send me a proposal from Apex. I want to be your first official client." This was it. The checkmate. I spent the weekend working with the Apex sales team to draw up a contract for Henderson Manufacturing. It was a beautiful document, detailing service guarantees, performance metrics, and a dedicated support team led by Maria, Carla, and Ray. On Monday morning, we sent it over. Meanwhile, the news of Henderson's departure hit O'Malley like a bomb. Maria, who was serving out her last few days, described the scene as pure pandemonium. Kyle had apparently been screaming at the dispatcher AT department that managed the OptiRoute software at anyone he could find. He couldn't comprehend how his perfect system had failed so spectacularly. He couldn't grasp that the problem wasn't the software, it was his arrogant refusal to listen to the people who knew better. The press release from Apex Holding went out on Tuesday. It was a masterpiece of corporate communication written by my friend at the Trade Journal. It didn't mention O'Malley by name. It simply announced the launch of the new Apex Specialized Logistics Division, helmed by industry veteran Franklin Miller. It highlighted the hiring of a dream team of experienced logistics professionals, and most importantly, it announced their first major client, a multi-million-dollar exclusive contract with Henderson Manufacturing. The story was framed as a triumph for Apex, a testament to their forward-thinking strategy of investing in top talent. But anyone in the industry could read between the lines. It was a public humiliation for O'Malley Freight. They hadn't just lost their most respected leader, they had lost his entire team and their flagship client to their biggest rival in the span of 3 weeks. The phone call I had been waiting for finally came on Wednesday afternoon. The caller ID simply said O'Malley Freight. I let it ring 3 times, then picked up. My office was quiet. I leaned back in my chair and put my feet up on the desk, looking out at the city. "Franklin Miller," I said, my voice calm and even. "Franklin." It was Kyle. His voice was no longer the smooth, condescending purr of a confident executive. It was high-pitched, strained, cracking with a mixture of rage and panic. "What have you done?" I feigned confusion. "Kyle, to what do I owe the pleasure? Don't play dumb with me, Franklin. You've stolen my employees. You've poached my biggest client. This is a flagrant violation of your separation agreement. Our lawyers will be in touch. We're going to sue you into the ground." I listened to his tirade, a storm of empty threats and impotent fury. When he finally paused to take a breath, I spoke, my voice still quiet. "Kyle, I haven't stolen anyone. Your best people were unhappy, and they chose to seek employment elsewhere. They applied for jobs that were publicly posted. I simply hired the most qualified candidates. It's called a free market. You, of all people with your MBA, should understand that. As for Arthur Henderson, his contract was with O'Malley, not with you, and O'Malley failed to meet the terms of that contract. He terminated it for cause, as was his right. He then chose to sign with a provider who he felt could offer a more reliable service. That's also how the free market works." The silence on the other end was thick with his seething anger. He was a man drowning, and he was looking for someone to blame for the water. I continued, my voice taking on a harder edge. "You know, Kyle, you saw me as a liability. You saw my pension, my experience, my people, as line items on a spreadsheet cost to be cut. You never understood what they were. They weren't liabilities. They were the only real assets the company had. You didn't streamline the company. You gutted it. You ripped out the foundation and were surprised when the walls started to crack. Competence isn't cheap until you lose it. And you, my friend, are about to get a masterclass in the cost of incompetence." I could hear him sputtering on the other end, trying to form a response, but the words wouldn't come. He had no counter-argument. He was a king with no clothes, and I had just pointed it out in front of the whole world. I said, "Don't worry about having your lawyers call me, Kyle. Mine are already expecting it. They're quite looking forward to explaining the concept of an unenforceable non-compete clause to you. Have a nice day." And with that, I hung up the phone. I didn't feel anger or even triumph. I just felt a quiet, profound sense of vindication. The power had shifted. The man who had tried to erase me was now the one facing oblivion. The network he thought he controlled had crumbled, not because I had attacked it, but because its loyalty was never to a logo. It was to a promise, and he had been the one to break it. The fallout was swift and brutal. The exodus from O'Malley turned from a trickle into a flood, with Big Mike's crew and Maria's dispatch team now settled at Apex. A clear signal had been sent to everyone left behind. There was a lifeboat, and Franklin Miller was at the helm. My HR department at Apex was overwhelmed with applications from O'Malley employees, from drivers and mechanics to administrative staff, and even a few disillusioned mid-level managers. I was selective. I wasn't just trying to hurt O'Malley. I was trying to build a better company. I hired the competent, the dedicated, the ones who shared the old O'Malley philosophy of promises kept. The ones who, like me, had been made to feel like legacy's baggage by Kyle's new regime. We were a company of seasoned professionals, a collection of cast-offs and veterans who were hungry to prove their worth. Kyle's desperate counter-manipulations became the stuff of legend within the industry. Maria would forward me the internal memos she was still getting from friends at her old company. First, he increased the loyalty bonus to 15%. When that didn't stop the bleeding, he announced a new career pathing program, full of the same empty corporate jargon he always used. It was like trying to patch a sinking ship with masking tape. His most pathetic move came about a month after my call with him. He sent a formal offer letter to my home, not through a lawyer, but a personal hand-signed letter. He was offering me my old job back, with a 20% raise and a new title, Senior Executive Vice President of Logistics. He wrote about misunderstandings and the value of my experience. He was trying to buy back the asset he'd so carelessly discarded. It was a confession of his own failure, written on company letterhead. I didn't even bother to reply. I just shredded it. The real power shift became undeniable when other major clients started to get nervous. The story of Henderson Manufacturing's disastrous service failure and subsequent move to Apex was the talk of the industry. I started getting calls, tentative at first, then more direct, clients I'd worked with for years, asking about capacity at my new division. They'd all been reassured by Kyle that the operational hiccups were temporary, but they could see the writing on the wall. They saw their shipment tracking information becoming less reliable, their calls going to junior dispatchers who didn't know their business, and their delivery windows being missed. I didn't have to poach a single one. I just had to answer my phone and tell them the truth. We're building a world-class team here, and we'd be honored to have your business when you're ready. The final karmic blow landed about 3 months after I started at Apex. I got a call from a friend who still had contacts on the O'Malley board of directors. He told me that the parent company, the faceless corporation that had installed Kyle in the first place, had conducted an emergency audit. The numbers were catastrophic. The loss of the Henderson account, combined with the operational chaos, the cost of paying overtime to inexperienced drivers trying to fix the algorithm's mistakes, and the general collapse of efficiency, had turned the once profitable O'Malley freight into a financial black hole. They saw that the profit bump Kyle had projected by cutting my pension and other legacies costs was a mirage. He hadn't saved them money. He had torched their single greatest asset, their reputation for reliability. The board fired him. There was no farewell party, no cake. According to my friend, 2 security guards escorted him out of the building with his belongings in a cardboard box, just like that. The slick MBA, the master of synergy and data-driven paradigms, was gone, erased. His career, for the time being, was a smoking crater. My final confrontation with him wasn't a confrontation at all. It was an email I received about a week after he was fired. It was from his personal account. It was a short, rambling, pathetic message. It was full of accusations, blaming me for ruining his career, for being a relic who couldn't handle change. It was the desperate squeal of a man who couldn't accept that he had been the architect of his own demise. I thought about crafting a detailed reply, a final devastating takedown. I thought about listing all his mistakes, all his arrogant miscalculations. I thought about rubbing his face in the glorious success of my new division at Apex. But then I looked around my office. I could hear the confident hum of my dispatchers in the other room, the sound of Maria's team working in perfect sync. I looked at the board on my wall, already full of new clients and expanding routes. I thought about the profit-sharing checks that would be going out to my drivers at the end of the quarter, and I realized I had nothing left to say to him. He was irrelevant. The best revenge wasn't screaming at him. It was building something better. It was proving that my way of doing business, valuing people, respecting experience, keeping promises, wasn't a legacy system. It was a timeless one. I hit the delete button. He was no longer a part of my story. My new workplace reality is one I never could have imagined a year ago. Apex Specialized Logistics is now the most profitable division in the entire company. We have a waiting list of clients. We have the lowest driver turnover rate in the industry. Big Mike is now in a semi-retired role, training our new hires, passing on his decades of knowledge. Maria runs the dispatch center like a symphony orchestra. The other day, Robert Chen, the CEO, stopped by my office. He just stood in the doorway for a moment, watching my team work. He shook his head and smiled. He said, "Franklin, I thought I was hiring a good logistics man. I didn't realize I was getting a whole culture," and he was right. That's what I had brought with me. Not secrets, not data, but a culture of competence, a culture of trust, a culture that Kyle had tried to extinguish, but that had risen from the ashes, stronger and more vibrant than ever. My son, David, graduated from his MBA program with honors. He had multiple offers from big consulting firms and investment banks, but he turned them all down. He's spending the summer interning with me here at Apex. He's working on a project to improve our fuel efficiency using data analytics, but he's also spending 2 days a week riding shotgun with the drivers, learning the business from the asphalt up, just like I did. Last week, I walked past the conference room where he was presenting his initial findings to my management team. He was standing at the head of the table, confident and articulate, but without a trace of Kyle's arrogance. He was talking about numbers and data, but he was also talking about driver feedback and real-world conditions. He was using technology to empower our people, not to replace them. He was the perfect synthesis of the old school and the new. I stood there for a moment, unseen, just watching him. I saw the respect in the eyes of my team. Big Mike, Maria, the others. They weren't just listening to the boss's son. They were listening to a smart young man who understood their value. In that moment, everything came full circle. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about legacy. Not the kind Kyle talked about, the kind that you discard, but a real legacy. The kind you build, the kind you pass on. A legacy of treating people right, of valuing experience, and of understanding that the strongest network in the world isn't built with fiber optic cables, but with handshakes and kept promises. He thought my loyalty was to a logo. He was wrong, and that mistake cost him everything. So here's the moral of the story. In any company, in any industry, there are two kinds of value. There's the value that you can see on a spreadsheet, salaries, costs, profit margins. And then there's the value you can't see, the value that doesn't fit neatly into a box. It's the trust you've built with a client over 20 years. It's the institutional knowledge of an employee who knows how to fix a problem before it even becomes one. It's the culture of loyalty that makes people willing to go the extra mile, not because they have to, but because they want to. People like Kyle, the spreadsheet jockeys and the buzzword artists, they only see the first kind of value. They see experience as a cost. They see loyalty as a liability, and they think they can just cut it away, and everything will be fine. They think the machine will run just as well without its most vital parts. But what they don't understand is that the invisible value, the human value, is the engine. It's the foundation. And when you remove it, the whole structure rots from the inside out. They think they're being smart, but they're being penny-wise and pound-foolish on a catastrophic scale. Never let anyone tell you that your experience is obsolete. Never let anyone convince you that your loyalty is misplaced. And never ever believe that your worth can be captured on a balance sheet. Your true value lies in the trust you build, the problems you solve, and the promises you keep. In the end, that's the only currency that really matters. The company didn't make me. I made the company. And when they threw me away, I just went and built a better one. I hope my story resonated with some of you out there. If it did, let me know what you think in the comments below. I read every single one. What did you think of Kyle's strategy? Was I right to do what I did? I want to hear your stories too. This channel is a place for us, the people who do the work, to share our experiences. So please, like this video if you found it satisfying, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and most importantly, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next story. Because believe me, there are a lot more Kyles out there in the world, and their stories all need to be told. Thanks for listening.